What up, family? New Pack City, for the fans, by the fans. So before we get started, I want you guys to like, share, and subscribe our channel. Click the notification button below, and that will subscribe you to all our content on this channel. I'm gonna be dropping some dope videos when it comes to the Hawks, NBA, basketball in general. Might have some nuggets in there too for you. So definitely subscribe our channel and keep track of everything that we're doing on this channel. So today, gonna be talking about Dominique Wilkins' career with Atlanta. Why couldn't he bring a championship to Atlanta? What happened? What were the factors? Gonna be talking about all of that. Dominique, just to let you guys know, is my favorite all-time NBA player. I grew up watching this guy. Was devastated when he was traded. Still devastated to this day. Still believe he was a top 50 player. Should have been voted top 50. But I'm glad they gave him his flowers and put him top 75. So I want to kind of assess his career through a proper lens. Because a lot of times when these guys on these shows and stuff like that, they talk about his career, they only talk about the dunks. They only talk about, him. They only talk about that one game against Larry Bird in '88. There was more to Dominique than just those moments. There was a lot of substance to what he brought to the game. And it really hurts me as a fan of his that he really wasn't able to win a championship, not even in Atlanta, but anywhere in the States. And that his career is really diminished because of that, especially now in the ring culture where you got to win a title, you got to win a championship to be considered an all-time great. So Dominique was an all-time great, and I'm going to give him his flowers today. So he was brought here. He was brought to Atlanta in 1982. Of course, a UGA product, University of Georgia. So that was a great splash for the Hawks franchise, because at that time during the early 80s, they were really at a crossroads. Okay. Ted Turner on the team, and there was a lot of talk about relocation. There was a lot of talk about, will this franchise be sustainable in Atlanta? You got to think about it. Atlanta had already lost the Atlanta Flames in 1980, and they came around the same time as the Hawks. So at that time, Atlanta really wasn't considered a premier sports town. The city was still growing. The population base was still growing and expanding. But as far as sports, they really didn't have the cachet of the bigger cities. So, you really needed something to energize the fan base, and that's what Dominique did. He came here in '82, and as any young player, you're going to build. You're not going to, unless you're Magic Johnson or Larry Bird, you're not going to come in the league and win championships. So there was a time where he had to build and grow as a player, and not only him, but the franchise. So, of course, they're going to build pieces around him. In '83, they brought Doc Rivers. In '84, they brought Kevin Willis. Mike Fratello was brought in to coach around that time. They brought smaller pieces like Cliff Levingston, Antoine Carr, Spud Webb, John Concack. They still had Tree Rollins. So there was a lot of pieces that were built around Dominique. So it took a few years, but by '86, Atlanta was really at a point where they could really consider themselves not a contender like a Celtics or a Lakers, but at least a team that could be formidable. And so they were. And they won 50 games in '86. Mike Fratello won Coach of the Year. Stan Kasten won Executive of the Year. So there was a lot of positivity going on at that time. And you got to think about it. During that time, the NBA was ruled by Larry Bird and Magic Johnson, Lakers and Celtics. But in '86, we did play them in the second round, and we did knock a game off the Celtics. One game, but we knocked the game off of them. And as a Hawks fan, you're thinking, okay, by '87, '88, we're ready to take over the throne in the East. That was the thought process. And by '87, it's looking realistic. Atlanta won 57 games, won the Central Division, and you're thinking, okay, this is it. First round, they did what they supposed to do. They win the first round. Second round, they run into a team from Detroit called the Detroit Pistons. And this is where things make a left turn. We had home court advantage in that series and immediately dropped game one. Subsequently, go down 3-1. And the highlight of that series was Isaiah Thomas hitting a game-winning layup in game four. On Mother's Day, that was the same day that he actually graduated from the University of Indiana, and his mother received his degree for him. So he did not go down there like Vince Carter and get his degree. His mother actually did that for him on Mother's Day, and he proceeded to kick our ass that same day. So we lose that series in 5, and you're thinking, damn, like this is a setback. But we live to fight another day, right? So in 87, 88, we go back to the playoffs. This time, we get out of the first round again, and we fight the Boston Celtics in an epic 7-game series that we should have won, in my opinion. We should have won it because we had them down 3-2 going back to Atlanta. And this is where one of the factors in Dominique not winning the championship really came to light. Because in game 6, we're up 3-2. And Dominique does his part. He scores 35 points in the game. Even Doc Rivers, he did his part. He scored 32 in the game. But there was no other player on our team, on Atlanta, that scored even double figures in game 6. We lose the game by 2 points at home. Now you got to go back to Boston and deal with that in game 7. Fight as we may, we go up there, we fight. Epic game. It's been played all over. I don't have to go into detail. But Atlanta loses a heartbreaker in game 7 by 2 points. And so, again, as a Hawks fan, you're thinking, man, this is an opportunity. This was an opportunity to really shine and really go to the next step. And for Dominique, he's in the prime of his career. He's 28 years old at this point. And you're thinking, we got to get this guy a ring. We got to. So they add pieces, right? They add pieces. They subtract a couple of pieces. So they get rid of Randy Whitman. They get rid of Tree Rollins. And they bring in Moses Malone from Washington, who was previously on the Sixers. They bring in Reggie Theus, who was on the Kings. And it's more star power on the team. But I think that really wasn't a good mixture of players looking back on it. Specifically Dominique and Moses. I don't think they ever really meshed that well on the floor. Because Dominique played a specific style down on the block. Like he liked to operate on a certain block. And I remember reading a Sports Illustrated article that came out the following year talking about that specific thing, how Dominique and Moses really like to operate on the same spot on the floor, and it really caused a little bit of friction on that team. So that 88-89 season was really not what we thought it would be. As a fan base, we thought that we would really grow, especially with more star power. You would think that they would grow and be able to make that next step, but it just never really meshed that well. So they ran into the Bucks in the first round, who they had beaten the year before in 5 games. But this time around, Milwaukee was a lot more savvy. And what really sucks about that is that Atlanta probably should have swept that team. Milwaukee was injured. They really didn't have a superstar per se. I mean, they had guys like Terry Cummings and Ricky Pierce, um, Paul Pressey, Sidney Moncrief, but those guys were not superstars that could really elevate a team like a Dominique. But Milwaukee outsmarted Atlanta. They out hustled Atlanta, and that's how they won that series. I mean, honestly, Game Five, Terry Cummings got injured in Game 4 of that series, and they played without him in Game 5, and they still were able to come to Atlanta, and win that series. So now you're looking at being eliminated 4 straight years, not ever getting to a conference final, and that really started a downtrend with the Hawks franchise and Dominique. Yeah, so the next year they didn't even make the playoffs the following season. And that was really the handwriting on the wall for Mike Fratello in his tenure in Atlanta. Um, I think the players that tuned him out by that time, especially guys like Moses Malone, to a lesser extent Doc Rivers, and Dominique to an extent as well. I know Dominique, looking back, like he I won't say he butted heads with Mike Fratello very often. It wasn't like a Larry Brown, Allen Iverson situation, but I know that a lot of times they did kind of butt heads on certain things, and that happens in the course of a relationship with a coach and player. A lot of times they're gonna disagree on things, so it wasn't necessarily a factor where I think that Dominique wasn't listening to Mike Fratello, but I think over 7 seasons, you got to think about it, they've been together for 7 seasons. You pretty much heard everything this guy got to say, and it happens. It happened with Magic and Pat Riley. It happens with a lot of people. So, unfortunately, that's what happened in 1990. So, at that time, it was time to really transition the Hawks. And I think this is where I feel like, and this is a very unpopular opinion, I feel like Ted Turner really failed the Hawks franchise. He was a great owner for the Braves. He was a great owner for, in general. Like he kept the Braves and the Hawks in Atlanta. He prevented them from moving to other cities. It really, changed the landscape of the city and the culture of sports in Atlanta. But the reason I say that he was not a good owner for the Hawks is because of the resources that were not provided to Atlanta versus what were provided to the Braves. I've talked about this many times, and a lot of people don't agree with me. But when I look at what the Braves during that same time frame were able to do and accrue as a franchise versus what the Hawks were left with, I don't think it was equal. The Braves had a great farm system. They had great scouts. They had great. They got John Sherholtz, who was an all-time general manager, to build that team. And I think the Hawks just were not given the same luxury and the same personnel. They brought in Pete Babcock, who was not a terrible GM, but he was definitely not a guy like John Sherholtz. They brought in Bob Weiss, who was at best a mediocre head coach, when they could have played the long game and waited it out and got Pat Riley the following year, who took a sabbatical for 1 year. And if the Hawks were patient enough, they could have really got a franchise-changing coach and been, in my opinion, what the Miami Heat are today. But that was another thing. The Hawks were notoriously cheap. They did not want to invest not only in players and coaches and scouts and whatnot, but also facilities. You know what I'm saying? The Omni at that time was really a bottom 10 arena, if you want to be honest. Like, I mean, I love the Omni. I've been to plenty of games there, but let's be honest. During that time frame, the Omni was falling apart. You had ceiling tiles falling during the game. All kind of crazy stuff going on. But that's just that's just the nature of what was going on with the Hawks franchise. It was kind of in my opinion, they were treated like a stepchild by Ted Turner. I'm just gonna be honest with you. It was not the same energy that he gave them that he gave the Braves. And it's honestly, looking back on it, it's probably he's like, well, I mean, they're here and they're not going anywhere. So, but it is what it is. But I think that's a big factor as to why Dominique was not able to achieve that success in Atlanta. There were not the pieces put around him. When we did get pieces, or when we did have an opportunity to do what we needed to do, and we decided to pay players, we paid the wrong ones. We gave John Concac at the time the most ridiculous contract in NBA history. That was one thing. At one point, John Concac was making more money than Dominique. Think about that. John Concac was making more money than Dominique Wilkins, the guy that is the all-time player in his franchise history, was not even the best paid player on his own team. And I know during that time, a lot of that was going on. Michael Jordan was horrendously underpaid. That's just the nature of NBA contracts back in the late 80s and early 90s. Like, it was weird. But nevertheless, John Concac should not have been making more money than Dominique Wilkins. And that's what prevented Atlanta from being able to improve the team, because by then, free agency was a thing in the NBA. It wasn't really a thing when Dominique came into the NBA in 82, but by 1988, 89, 90, 91, you could sign free agents who would be impactful to your team and really help you elevate. Think about what the Phoenix Suns did. They signed Tom Chambers in 88. Immediately went to 2 straight Western Conference Finals. Think about if we could have done that in Atlanta and did that. So you gotta look at the totality of what happened during that era. But just again, Atlanta was evolving and not in a good way during that time frame. I talked about how they got Bob Weiss, and then you make a playoff, but you get kicked out of the first round. And by 91, you're trading Doc Rivers, you're trading Spud Webb. You get rid of guys like John Battle. Moses Malone, he pretty much was at the end of his career. So now you're transitioning. Nique's getting older. He's 32. The time is running out. And as we know, in 92, early in that season or midway through the season, he tears his Achilles. Now, to Dominique's credit, it ain't Kevin Durant that's the first guy to come back. It ain't Kobe Bryant. Dominique Wilkins was the first guy of major status that successfully came back from that injury. He came back. He injured it. I'll never forget this. I was watching the game. They were playing the Philadelphia 76ers on January 28th, 1992. Dominique hurt his Achilles, non-contact, and by November of 92, he was back on the floor. He scored 30 points opening night against the Knicks. So you can talk about KD all you want. You can talk about Kobe all you want. But Dominique was the first guy to really successfully come back from Achilles injury. And really that following season, he was a top 5 MVP candidate, if you want to be real about it. But, the team success was really not there under that Bob Weiss tenure. So in 93, of course, Atlanta decides to get rid of him and bring in Lenny Wilkins. So Lenny Wilkins is a guy who, one of the most winningest coaches in the NBA. Of course, he coached Seattle to a championship in 1979. Has a lot of status, a lot of cachet. And I was excited, really honestly, to bring in Lenny Wilkens, because I knew, even as a kid, I knew Bob Weiss wasn't that dude. You know what I'm saying? Like, I knew that we needed something more, something better, and we needed somebody who could really move the needle. And so Lenny Wilkens was it. He was brought in '93, and they built the team around Dominique. They finally started building pieces, winning pieces around him. You know, we had the previous year we had acquired Mookie Blaylock. They brought in guys like Craig Elo. You know what I'm saying? Like, hard-nosed players who really wanted to win and really were already bought into Lenny's program. You know, Elo was in Cleveland for so many years before that. And that 93-94 season was really, in my opinion, it was a dream. It was a dream, you know. The team played well. They started bad. They started 1-4, but they started winning, really, truly winning. And you were thinking, okay, this is it. You know, like the feeling that Hawks fans probably had in 86, 87. But at this time now, there's no Michael Jordan. Okay, so there's really a true opportunity to win it all, because there's no Michael Jordan. Magic and Larry Bird are long gone. And you're thinking, okay, we can really do this. And they get out to a great start. Then there's talk. There's talk. Starting with December, January, about, oh, is Dominique gonna, are the Hawks gonna re-sign him, whatnot? Because Dominique was gonna be a free agent the following year, the offseason. And you start hearing these trade rumors. You as a fan, you're like, no, there's no way. We're having a great season. There is no way Dominique Wilkins is gonna be traded this year. It just can't happen. It's impossible. And talks start going. And the next thing you know, on February 24th, 1994, Dominique Wilkins was traded from Atlanta for Danny Manning. Sad day. Very hurtful day. Even, 30 years later, still haven't gotten over it. I'll conclude with this. I think in the whole picture, the big picture, that Dominique could have and should have at least made a conference finals at least once in Atlanta. I understand that you're in the league, you're in a conference where you got the Celtics during the early to late 80s, the Pistons after that, the Bulls after that. So I get it. Like, there were some in the way. But there are 3 or 4 seasons during Dominique's time here where I feel like we really honestly should have at least made a conference finals, if not an NBA finals. But the main factors, in my opinion, again, bad drafting, because there were no all-stars drafted by the Hawks after 1984. We went a whole 23 years between drafted all-stars. Number 2, Hawks being cheap. Again, I talked about Ted Turner. I cannot sit here and confidently say that Ted Turner was a great owner of the Hawks. I can't. There's not the same level of investment that he gave to the Hawks that he gave to the Braves. And number 3 is just timing. Really timing. I think if he was born in 1970 as opposed to 1960, I believe he gets a ring, because then, he comes in the league, like 1992. Yes, you got the Jordan run between 91 and 98, but he's hitting his prime by like 98, 99, 2000. There's a lot more parity in the East. I think you're going to be able to get a finals appearance for sure. And who knows, maybe more than that. But that's all I got, guys. I just wanted to kind of rehash or relive Dominique Wilkins' career in Atlanta. Again, like, share, subscribe our channel. We're going to be putting out a whole lot of heat, guys. So definitely give me some suggestions. Let me know what kind of content you want to hear, what kind of stories you want to hear about the Hawks. I got them for you. Whatever you want, I got you. So again, this New Pack City, for the fans, by the fans. Peace.